Hello there.
Hello everyone, I'm the Weather Dude. Welcome back, and today we're going to be taking our third look at the 2024 Atlantic hurricane season. Just going to show you guys some updated maps that recently came out, and at the end of the video you're going to want to stay tuned because there is some potential tropical development that could be taking place over the next week or two that could potentially be a signal as to how this season could possibly turn out. So be sure to, as always, subscribe to the channel, and we're just going to get right into it here. Starting off with, again, just a review of the names. I'm just going to leave it up here for a second so you guys can look at it. I kind of did go over this in the last video. Just a list of the names for the Atlantic hurricane season. And just an update as well. Of course, we have our El Nino advisory in place right now, but we also do have a La Nina watch, which is kind of a signal that we're in a transition period here, where there's essentially a 50-50 chance that over the summer we could be in a La Nina seasonal pattern. And for July to September, there's almost a 70% chance of this occurring. And as we know, La Ninas typically favor Atlantic hurricane season activity, which is definitely going to play into what this season could be like. It's going to be certainly a big factor. The latest run from the Bureau of Meteorology, latest run of their models here, you can see again updated May 25th, so this was updated pretty recently. You can see again going through ENSO neutral right now. We're kind of in that again transition period before we could possibly drop even further as the models are indicating, but potentially going flat, right? So kind of just staying, once we hit a certain point. Now this could potentially be on the, closer to La Nina side, right? But like I said in previous videos, even in ENSO neutral years, again, another example, 2004, could still lead to active hurricane seasons as well. Right, so kind of just breaking it down here month by month, you can see the list of 7 models on your left side of your screen and the average of them below that. You can see this is for June, again, probably around ENSO neutral, maybe for July. But once we hit August, the general consensus is we could be closing in on that La Nina territory there. Right, as you can see by several of these models, including the NOAA and CANCIPS models. If we look at say the month of September, we just keep advancing a little bit slowly but surely, and certainly by October we could be in a La Nina pattern here, which would definitely influence the second half of the hurricane season the most. If we look at the sea surface temperature anomalies here, you can see again, it's only gotten warmer since last time I talked about this. And again, the last time I did do this video, I believe, was just over a week ago, so sea surface temperatures aren't going to change a ton, but they certainly have started to warm up in places, especially across the northern part of the Pacific, or the Atlantic Ocean, which I'll show you in just a minute here. If you look at the sea surface temperatures, you can really see where that yellow is starting to kind of creep up, right? That's signaling those 77-degree plus waters, anywhere where the yellow is. And the orange is essentially 80 degrees Fahrenheit or warmer, which is, honestly, at this point, much of the MDR, right? Even in the Caribbean, the Gulf of Mexico, in a lot of coverage there of 80-degree plus waters in the Gulf Stream off the southeastern U.S. coast. Now look at this. This is the sea surface temperature trends from the past 7 days. And you can see in the northern part of the Atlantic, where it matters, right? Because, at this point, the Gulf, the Caribbean, the eastern tropical Atlantic are almost about warm enough at this point. But what matters is getting the northern Atlantic warmed up. And that's what's certainly been happening over the past 7 days here, anywhere from a half a degree to as much as 2.5 degrees Celsius, and just just the past week that we've warmed up by. Even on the East Coast as well, warmed up by about 3 degrees Celsius plus. Even in the Gulf of Mexico, we have been warming up by over a degree Celsius in just the past week. All right, just some snapshots here of where we've seen some really warm sea surface temperatures. Bay of Campeche, southwestern Gulf of Mexico, 87-degree water temperatures right now. Looking at Tampa and Cape Coral, by the way, 97 and 98 degrees right now. It is crazy hot over there. 88-degree water temperatures where the Bahamas are, so some pretty crazy sea surface temperatures there. If we take a look at the Saharan air layer, the dry air layer, right? You saw how it looked in the last video, right? There was some coverage, but it was kind of broken up. Now, honestly, I really don't see much of anything. Right, and this tropical development, spoiler alert, is going to be kind of in the Caribbean zone here, that area we're going to be watching. But there is not much dry air to be found. At this point, it almost looks like there's less coverage. In other words, there's probably more space in the or more coverage in the Atlantic with no dry air than there is with it, right? And that's very unusual for the month of June, right? Usually it's still kind of in effect. But honestly, like the Caribbean, the East Tropical Atlantic, very little dry air to be found here. And so any convection that can get through here, right, will certainly have no trouble, developing potentially in the future. So this is definitely a concerning sign as well. All right, if we take a look here at the CHI, again, this is just kind of like our convection map that we looked at the last video. Again, just kind of giving some updates here. Noticing the convection potentially, below average, right? This kind of goes every 4-day increments. So this would be June 4th, June 8th, right? Even by June 14th, we could see some potentially increased convection, right? Through middle, all the way through the end of June. For the Caribbean, notice how it kind of works its way off to the east, right? The browns, the greens, everything kind of shifts, right? Everything in weather is a pattern. There's a pattern of time, or there's a period of time where a certain pattern is set in place. And this map kind of models that well, right? Increased convection, right? At the end of June, but before that it was decreased convection. Eventually it'll move back in again. It's all about patterns in weather. But noticing here through the beginning of July, again, potentially in the MDR regions now, we could see some increased convection. And that could potentially lead to some increased tropical development over the next month or two. Looking at the wind shear, pretty much a perfectly consolidated zone here, where the wind shear is just absolutely, off the charts. So really don't have to worry about anything right now. All right, and there's even a lot of shear over the Caribbean, so we'll see how that affects that potential disturbance there. But do know that this area won't have to be watched for another few days, right? Kind of like the first week of June is when we kind of have to start watching that area, see how that plays out. But the East Coast wind shear, Gulf of Mexico wind shear, Tropical Atlantic wind shear, maybe in the northern Tropical Atlantic, wind shear has kind of been starting to taper off. But other than that, wind shear is kind of, inhibiting a lot of the development right now. Looking at June, again, as we went over last video, the Gulf of Mexico, the Caribbean, the East Coast is where we're going to see most of your tropical activity here for the month of June. If we look at the NOAA probability map here, essentially, or the chart, essentially showing, probabilities of, whichever climatological pattern. Again, nothing really has changed from that last video either. La Nina chance is kind of peaking here around, the September, October months, right? And the highest chance being in December, in the winter time. So we'll see how that could affect the winter time potentially. But there could still, there's still a greater than 50-50 chance of La Nina, even as early as August. So we'll see how again, that could affect maybe the second half of this hurricane season with increased activity. If we look at the CFS models, right, kind of like their spaghetti models, if you want to call them that, kind of showing, again, potentially a drop into La Nina territory as early as the month of August, and potentially, again, peaking like the NOAA graph was showing, maybe peaking around December before kind of flattening out here. So La Nina, again, causes less wind shear typically in the Atlantic Basin. We're not there yet, so that's why you're not seeing it yet, but typically causes less wind shear in the Atlantic Basin, and wind shear is a element that kind of inhibits tropical development. So if there's less of that wind shear, there could be more hurricane development, if that makes sense. If we look at some more model predictions here, kind of got like a little updated graph here. You can see from these, right? You're trying to look for where there's like the most compact lines, right? Like where the most amount of models are kind of sitting right now. I mean, honestly, I would say more of them have a La Nina pattern than those that don't. Because you can see August, September is a lot of models that are in the La Nina territory versus a few that really aren't. So I would say more are for it than are against it. So, the odds are kind of stacking in favor here of either, really close to or potentially getting to the La Nina territory. Again, just another look here at where we've kind of been, right? The moderate to almost strong El Nino here late last year, and is kind of starting to dwindle, all right? And April and May haven't been put into this chart yet, but it's usually a month or two delay. But this kind of shows you here in December where we were at, and now, at least in March, right? There was a big drop, so we're kind of, the Pacific waters, and again, this is the Nino 3-4 region, that region below Hawaii, to the south of Hawaii, along the equator, that kind of helps us predict these climatological patterns here and the sea surface temperatures that go along with it. So again, red El Nino, blue represents La Nina. All right, if we look at those latest sea surface temperature departures, right, kind of where I was just talking about, south of Hawaii along the equator is where that Nino 3-4 region is, right? And again, it's about it's a combination of Nino 4 and Nino 3, ergo Nino 3-4. That region has been at about positive 0.2, so in other words, 0.2 degrees Celsius above average, which again, from where we were in March, I would say is a pretty big drop still, right? And it's only going to be dropping further from there. Right, so Nino 3 maybe a little cooler, Nino 4 a little warmer, and then in the middle of that is kind of where we're standing right now. If we look at the CDAS version of it, you can see we drop below the zero line on the CDAS measurements. Right, so honestly at this point, according to them, we're only about 0.4 degrees Celsius of a drop more before we're kind of in that La Nina territory. So something to keep in mind. Again, since like March, I mean, it's just been, if you just put a dot here, right, and you put a dot here, right, from where we were in early March versus now, and then you put the line in between there like this, you can see the trend line in general has been in the downward direction, right, from about 1.25 degrees Celsius above average, which we were back in March, till now where we're now sitting, according to the CDAS, at negative 0.15, right, so we're getting ever closer to that potential for La Nina. Now, as we wrap up the video here, let's just take a quick look at the GFS model to show us this potential disturbance that one of the websites, particularly AccuWeather, was kind of highlighting there. And you can see potentially another storm system, maybe not tropical, but along the east coast there. All right, so I'm just going to let this replay one more time so you can see the area of convection that forms to the south of Cuba here in the Dominican Republic. You can see kind of gains a little bit of strength, transfers over here, before gaining some more strength and moving out to sea. So we'll see, of course, land interaction is always a problem here with these Caribbean storms that tend to move north, right? Because we've got a bunch of land masses here. So that will be something to keep in mind. But there is the probability, right? There is a chance, right? And AccuWeather kind of highlights it here, according to them, between June 4th and 6th for Cuba, Hispaniola, and Jamaica. Right? We can see some showers and thunderstorms. Probably not going to impact the United States, but of course, we do know with these stationary fronts that could cause some lift, some energy, some spin that could allow, any convection that forms near here to get that boost it needs to potentially form. But again, landmass, I think, could be one of the things that could potentially hinder the storm's development, as well as the wind shear at this present time. All right, so just to close out here, just going to take another look at my personal forecast for this hurricane season. Nothing has really changed since the second update regarding this, right, until we get more information in. So I'm just going to kind of leave this up on your screen. You can see all the different sources. And again, named storms is the first row here, followed by hurricanes and then major hurricanes. And do know that while not all of these will necessarily impact the United States, a handful of them could. And as we always say, it only really takes one. So just to recap my forecast here, 18 to 22 named storms, 9 to 12 hurricanes, and 4 to 6 major hurricanes is my current, as of May 30th, this is my current forecast for the 2024 Atlantic hurricane season. So that's it for today's video. Thank you guys so much for watching. Be sure to stay tuned for the next video. I am the Weather Dude signing off. Till next time, I'll catch you guys in the next video.